Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to take a look at the Magicka Sorcerer PvE build Mystique for Morrowind. I also have a written guide on my website alcasthq.com. I will put the link into the description. In the first part of the video I want to talk about the basics, and the second part I want to talk about resource management and like resources in general and the rotation of the build. So let's get started. Also, don't forget to subscribe. I will talk a lot more about this kind of subject in future videos. So first off, let's just check our stats. As you see, we have really high Magicka recovery, a little bit less maximum Magicka. That's because we have 19 points into the health attribute due to us using the Witchmother's Potent Brew, which gives us max Magicka, max health and Magicka recovery. We are running the 5th Mundus Stone, and we are a vampire. Why vampire? Because this year you need to be stage 2, so you get 10% more more Magicka recovery. I am a high elf. We are heavily focusing on shock abilities this patch with this build. So high elf is the best choice, gives you 4% more shock damage, max Magicka and Magicka recovery. Dark Elf or Breton also works like a charm, obviously. In terms of buff food, I use this. However, I will talk later in the resource management section that you also can use this and what you need to do to change up and how it will impact the build. Potion spell power pots. On my website you'll find the ingredients. Like, they give us a spell damage buff, the spell crit buff, and they give us a lot of Magicka back. In terms of gear, we use 7 light pieces. We have 2 Elambris. Elambris is really strong, especially because we are mostly ranged, so this helps a lot. Then 5 Nature's Touch, and that's why we focus a lot on shock abilities and shock damage, because you see, adds 400 spell damage to your shock damage abilities. This is insane. That's a lot of crazy damage. Now, Scathing, Julianos, Twiceborn Star, they all also work for this build. It's just I found that I had the most DPS with the Nature's Touch. It drops in Dark Shade if I remember correctly. Then we have 3 Moondancer, full spell damage, because we get the Minor Slayer. It's really strong. Then 2 Maelstrom Lightning Staves with Sharpened. And Drain Magicka Poisons, I will talk about those later. Now, what if you don't have Lightning, or what if you don't have Maelstrom Staves? You could use Master Staves, which drop in Dragon's Arena. Or you could use Nature's Touch, Staves, Shock, and then use 1 Moondancer piece. So you get like 4 bonuses of Moondancer with 1 armor piece, and then you have 4 Nature's Touch with 2 Nature's Touch staves, right? That also works, so you don't need to grind Maelstrom. But it's more explained on my website. Obviously, this, it's the best because we get the Crushing Wall. It increases our light damage by a lot. It deals a ton of damage. That's the gear setup. There is alternative and beginner setups on my website if you want to go check them out. Champion points. 100 in Arcanist, 64 Tenacity. This is always for Magicka recovery, this heavy attacks. On trash fights, we get our damage from shock heavy attacks, AoE damage. So this is nice to have. Then 2 Sprinter, because I didn't know where else to put them, and 44 Warlord. This is nice because, especially in the new trial, you will need to break free a lot, believe me. And 49, 49, 49, 2, and 61. Now, overall, the champion system gives us more damage mitigation, because this is damage mitigation for direct damage abilities. Then damage over time effects mitigation, magic, and physical. So we have way more damage mitigation compared to last patch. 75 Thaumaturge, you need this because of the exploited passive. We are focusing heavily on shock abilities, which can proc concussion. Once concussion is on the enemy, the enemy with a shock wall will be set off balanced. So concussion gives you 8% more damage, off balance 10, so you get 18% more overall damage. That's insane. So you need to have this here. Then 23 Master at Arms, 56 Elfborn and 56 Elemental Experts. If you don't like this here, you also could put it into the Spell Erosion, just make sure not to over penetrate. Most bosses have 18.2k spell resistance, so you need to calculate it yourself. I have a video talking on that kind of subject. I will put a link into the description. That's it with the CP setup. They are optimized with jump points. It's also on my website because there's a lot of weird things going off the CP, but this here should be pretty good. In terms of skills, there's a few things you can do. We are using the Shock Clench. Mine is only level 1, but whatever. Deals actually really nice damage. Then we have Hardened Ward. Now this is here because it's like, you can see 19k shield. That's another thing why Storks are so strong. Most other classes only get the 12k shield. If we invest points in the Bastion, which you could in the Champion Points 3, you could get up to 25k if you want. But 19k is already enough. So you need to learn. When there's a lot of incoming damage, shield up so you don't die. Force Pulse, our spammable. Inner Light gives us 7% more max Magicka, 5% from here. Then another 5 from this here. Increase your max Magicka by 2 for each mage skill ability slotted. We have the Meteor as well, another 2%. We don't really need this one here, but it gives us more max Magicka. And morph it to Shooting Star, because it can be nice on trash fights to use Shooting Star, but I simply don't have it leveled up. Then we have Bound Aegis, gives us 8% more max Magicka. You also, instead of Inner Light, you could run Boundless Storm. Doesn't necessarily do a lot of damage, however, it looks cool. And you get damage mitigation, you get about 10% damage mitigation, because you get Major Resolve and Major Ward. Or you could slot Crystal Frags if you want. You also could slot Crystal Frags instead of Shock Clench, but I prefer this actually over Crystal Fragments. Back Bar, Blockade of Storms. With Nature's Touch it always does a ton of damage, and you see it can proc off balanced. Liquid Lightning, one of the strongest dots in the game. Haunting Curse, mine is only level 1, but it's really nice. We can reapply this every second rotation. Deals really nice damage. And Mage's Wrath, this is our execute, really cheap compared to other abilities. And the Thunderous Rage, probably the strongest ultimate in the game, and it like 9 seconds duration. It's insane. And because we are a Sorc, you see, like other classes have to get 250 ultimates, but because we have cool stuff like this here, reduced cost of ultimate abilities, we only need 213 ulti points to get it ready. Now those here I don't have them because they only work when we have pets, but yeah, we don't have pets. So you see we have a lot of shock abilities, so we heavily focus on shock, which can proc concussion, and if you have the shock wall it procs off balanced. So if you're in a dungeon, trial or anywhere, if you're in a group, all your group members also benefit from this extra damage. That's why this build is so strong. It boosts the group damage by so much. Other important things to mention: 5% more shock damage from this passive. Like I said, we are an Altmer, we use the Nature's Touch, we have so much shock damage, it's insane. Then we have Implosion, basically an automatic execute. When the enemy is below 15% health, you deal 10k shock damage. Don't have to worry about it, it will just proc. And we get a little bit more spell damage. That's about the setup. If you want, you also could use Power Surge when you play alone, or you want some more like survivability, because it gives you healing and it also gives you a spell damage buff, which we have from potions at the moment. That's basically it about the setup. Remember, it's important that you play around. Don't just copy paste the build, take the most important info out and adjust your own build. Another thing, don't forget the medicinal use. This is very important, especially if you use the potions and the undaunted. Now in terms of resource management, there is a lot of ways. Like I previously said, Drain Magicka Poison is probably the most effective one. They are very expensive though, if you have to craft them, because like in 3 hours you use up like 1,500 of them. You see, they give you 240 Magicka every second for 5 seconds. It's really strong, and they proc basically almost on cooldown. It's insane. If you don't want to use those, what you could do is, instead of running a spell damage glyph here, you could replace it with a Magicka recovery glyph. Or you could just do more heavy attacks. That's another option to restore more resources. But I simply prefer those too much, and we have more damage if you use a spell damage glyph. But again, this would be the second option. Now you might be wondering, yeah, but I want to use this here. So you could use this buff food. And as you see, we get more health now, so we could take out the attribute points here and put them into Magicka to get more max Magicka, right? But that's kind of up to you. If you run this setup, your Magicka recovery will drop really low. So you will have to do a lot of more heavy attacks. That's the thing. And I found I had more DPS with the Witch's Mother brew up. However, in groups, some people have better sustains, some less. So make sure to play around with this. Like I said, this is only one of the options you have. Just make sure to give it the test to see the difference. Obviously, in a group you have the blazing, like you have the spears or the orbs, which return like 4k Magicka, which is really nice. That's it about the resource management. Again, like Sorc has one more thing about the heavy attacks. Let me see if I can find it. Where is it? Here. Fully charged shock heavy attacks. Shock heavy attacks damage nearby enemies for 130% of the damage done. That's why we don't have AoE ability on my bar, right? Because this alone deals more damage than an impulse, like than this, for example. So on trash fights you will never run out of sustain, because this passive is too strong. Now in terms of rotation, basically now everybody has access to dot trackers. So I want you to understand how you can track your dots. Well, or how you should do it. So as you see, we have on the back bar, basically every time when we start off with the rotation, let's just take the target skeleton. I start off with the Destro ulti, so I would use my Destro ulti. Then I do a light attack, liquid lightning, light attack, blockade of shock, light attack, haunting curse, weapon swap. And then you use the clench and you do light attack, force, pulse weaving till your dots on the back bar run out. Once they run out, you swap back, you drop liquid lightning, blockade of storms, weapon swap. And you keep force pulsing till you have to reapply the clench. So you kind of have to track your shock clench because it has a longer duration than other skills. Once the dots run out on the back bar again, you weapon swap again, you drop the liquid, blockade, curse. So every second rotation you use the curse. Because you see, like, it has a total duration of 12 seconds. The first one explodes after 3.5 seconds and the next one after, like, at 12 seconds. That's why we only need to use it every second rotation, which means we can save a lot of Magicka. Because when we would have to use it every rotation, we would lose more Magicka. Now, as far as I understood, on console, you cannot drag track ground-based abilities yet. So what I recommend is you track Shock Clench. Every time Shock Clench runs out, because you see an additional X shock damage over 8 seconds. You know, the moment this runs out, you basically can weapon swap or like 2 seconds earlier and reapply all dots. Because that's kind of your tracker, right? You always want to track one ability. On PC with add-ons, I like to track the Blockade of Storms with Surrender. As you can see, the small icon there, like when you use Surrender, it will be a bigger symbol. The moment it reaches 2 seconds, like the moment it reaches 2 seconds here, I can keep weaving, right? I usually use the clench and then I weapon swap, reapply liquid and then the blockade. Basically the moment it runs out, the blockade gets reapplied. That's very important. I just want to show off the rotation. Keep in mind, like, I am on the PTS here because I don't have the gear on live. So my ping is like 180, plus I don't have Shock Clench and I don't have Haunting Curse maxed out, they're only level 1. So overall I miss like 2 to 3, 4k DPS on my setup here. And also we have a lot of shock abilities, so concussion and off balanced is a lot. Also don't forget that. Okay, let's give this a try. Now, as you have seen, like, you might think, oh, you still run out of resources, but this is not that much of a problem because you have orbs or spears in raids which you can pick up and your sustain should be fine. Sometimes you cannot damage the boss, so you could do a heavy attack to restore or simply just weave one heavy attack in a rotation. But yeah, that's what you kind of need to play around with in the end. Now I kind of hope this helped a little bit. I mean, the rotation, again, it's not something like maced into stone, right? Because you want the dot trackers. And I just mostly track this one. The moment it reaches 2 seconds, I just go reapply this, and every second rotation, the Haunting Curse. And in execute phase, I always stay on this bar. Because I can use the execute and then I can simply reapply my dots and curse if needed and then just keep executing. I actually never have to swap here again. Unless obviously in a raid you want to use a shield or something to be safe. Then yes, you could swap to the front bar. So I hope this gave you at least a little bit better understanding of how this build works. Now if you do have any questions, please ask me in the comment section below. Thank you for watching and have a nice day. Cheers.